We're heading into festival season, and with that comes an influx of groups gathering centered around drinking. And when I think of this combination, I'm reminded of a tragic loss our community endured 10 years ago. Emily Bernauer was just 12 days shy of her 19th birthday when she died in a car crash near Amherstburg. You will remember Emily. She was working at a food booth at the shores of Erie International Wine Festival earlier that day. After leaving the festival, she crashed her car on concession 2. Her car hit a mailbox and flipped over. Emily wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and she was partially ejected from the vehicle. Toxicology reports confirmed there was alcohol in her system at the time of the impact. Shores of Erie International Wine Festival was fined $65,000 for giving her alcohol, and ultimately the festival shut down. As we enter into another festival season, we wanted to check back with her brother, CJ, and he joins me in the studio. Good morning, CJ.
Hi there.
I can't believe it's been 10 years.
Yeah, time flies. It's crazy.
I know, on September 6th. And I invited you here this morning because I wanted to check in. I think the community wants to know how you guys are doing.
Good, as good as you can be. Everybody's doing what they can, and as the time goes on, you think it's going to be something that I think you think it's going to be going away and stuff, but you kind of just distract yourself. You find yourself doing that for 10 years, and then as soon as those thoughts come back, it builds those feelings, get back to. So.
And what are the thoughts that keep coming back?
Just, so young, and you think about all the moments that she's missing in your life, that you're experiencing these things. Like, I got kids now, my sister's married, and all these things in life that she had to miss, and those are the things that come up, and you're like, oh, it's hard to think about.
Yeah. What was your relationship like with Emily?
Emily, growing up, she was like my best friend. We were really close. She was a couple years younger than me, so I always got to be the guy who showed her stuff, and she'd be like, oh, that's so cool. And everything I showed her, she thought was like amazing because I was older than her. So we used to watch late night talk shows and laugh and comedy, everything. Yeah, so she was just a really fun person. Probably the funniest person I've ever met in my life, too.
Funnier than you?
Yeah,
because you are a comedian.
She's so raw funny. It's just the stuff that you'd hear her say. You'd be like, where did that thought even come from? It was just so obscure. And yeah, she was very, very, very funny.
Where do you think her life would have led her? Would she have gone down the pathway of comedy like you?
I don't. I think she was a slightly more talented. She was more. She was very disciplined, and she actually loved sales and business, and she was very much into that. Her being funny was just a talent. It wasn't much of a skill she was trying to hone. So she was just having fun. That's who she was.
I'm also wondering what it's been like for you to grieve such a personal loss in the public eye.
It was. What's funny is it's a weird thing because it feels like it should be worse. It's such a public thing. But as the time went on, even the bad stuff that was coming out, it was like a way that I always felt connected to her. If I was defending her or something like that, I was feeling connected. And I got to go through that. It was kind of cathartic in the way that I was like still, it felt like she was still there. And it wasn't until a year, 2 years down the line when those noises stopped and I really had to grieve alone. And it was like that was harder then than it was going through the public stuff, because as angry as you are, at least you're still going through the process, and then all of a sudden that noise stops and you're just by yourself and you kind of have to accept some things, and that's when it got really bad, And you get through it, but I mean that's when it's almost like I waited that time to grieve, Yeah.
2 years later or a year.
Yeah, as long as it took for all the noise to stop, yeah.
Yeah. What did you need from the community then?
Well, no, it was just more so that because of all that things going on, I did a documentary about the afterlife and stuff. I was doing stuff that connected me to her, and then once it was kind of like, okay, now move on with your own life, and she's not there. It's like, oh, these things were all these things that were going on were kind of helping me cling to her, and now I have to kind of move on with my own life. It was like, again, like it was like grieving fully at that point.
What were some of the lessons that you learned through that process?
The grieving process, or
both? I'm wondering, the reason she came to mind to me was as we hit festival season, I was thinking of different things that were coming out of the different festivals. And I thought of your sister because I covered her story 10 years ago, went out and took photos of that mailbox and I connected with her in a different way. Yeah. And I learned things through that. Yeah. Right.
I think it's so much so of like the biggest lesson is like trying to be careful too, because it's like you want to make sure when you the funnest parts in life when you're carefree. So you're not thinking about all the choices that are happening, and you're thinking that maybe some things would be in place that aren't safety measures or whatever would be in place that aren't. So as you're getting away with these things, you think it's okay, and then something happens and it's not. For as far as that goes,
Like how fragile life is.
yes,
Because
yes,
at the time, I remember thinking, oh man, I've made silly decisions in my own teenage years
yeah,
and I survived them.
yeah,
And
100%.
she made decisions I think a lot of people make, and it didn't turn out that way.
It's so strange too, and it's a weird thing because if you even look at where I don't want to get into too much of the details of it, but where she hit the mailbox, I mean,
There
to
was
hit
nothing
that,
else there.
there's nothing else there. It was like a 1 in a billion chance that she hit that one spot where that could happen. So it's like, it's a weird thing, yeah. How much people do stuff like that all the time, and make bad choices, make mistakes, and then they just they live their life and they get to learn from it in a different way. But it is very strange, yeah.
Yeah. I've also wondered, when tragedy like this hits us, and when all of us can identify in some capacity what it's like to go through what you're going through, although we can never understand what this is like, it changes how we live our own lives. Has it changed how you've lived your life?
Yeah, because it's one of those things too, and I'm sure anybody who's grieving can feel the same kind of thing where it's like there's especially someone who you're so close to and you lean so much on. My whole life was always just I'll send her a text and something's going on with my life, I can update her. It's like having a bad fight and you can never fix it. I can never there's nothing I could send that would make that person be okay with whatever. So in that sense, it's kind of like you look at your relations with people differently, and my whole life changed really, because my whole life at that point I knew this was like my crutch. I could always just send her a message if something's going on. I could always just and you kind of have to just start walking on your own. And yeah, that's really a big thing that I learned too is
Has it changed the family dynamics, I imagine, a lot as well?
yeah, well, you know what, my parents, they've kept so strong for stuff. Like my mom visits her every day. At both my parents I think do, but at this cemetery, they beautiful flower display. Every holiday they dress it up different stuff for different colors and stuff, and every event they make sure she's somehow included. Like anything they can do to make it feel like she's still there and they're still celebrating her. They do that constantly.
And her birthday, which is coming up in September.
18th, yeah.
Yeah. You're an artist, you're a comedian. Has any of this filtered into an expressive way for you?
Well, you know what is when she first passed away, I tried to get back on the horse and try to do stand up again, because I had done stand up before she passed away for like a year and a half, whatever. And then when she passed, I tried to get back on stage, and I did try some like really dark, weird stuff of like grieving and stuff. And I just didn't like how it was going. I'm like, these people
Wasn't sticking?
I don't think these people are really here for this. They weren't having too much fun with me, like about to cry. I'm like, no, this isn't too funny. Okay, sure. Yeah, so that's part of why I stopped doing comedy for a long time, and then just started back up 2 years ago now.
Had she been to your shows?
She'd never been to. No, I'm sorry. She did go to one. She was at one. It was at Milk Coffee Bar. That was the only one she was ever allowed to go to. Because I remember there was one. She was outside. She wasn't allowed in, so she was outside listening. But she did go to one, and yeah. I mean, I'm happy she got to see one.
Did she think you were funny?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Whenever I'd say anything funny, it was very hard for me to make her laugh, because she's like, yeah, for sure. Like she would just go along with it. So it's almost like I'm breaking.
It sounds like her sense of humor is that's a rational way of
yeah,
thinking,
that's
right?
how
It
she
was
would,
so natural to her.
So you wouldn't really get much of a reaction. She'd be like, yeah, of course, that makes sense. And you're like, okay, yeah. So we're just going along with this, yeah. So it wasn't as often as she was laughing out loud. So whenever I did make her laugh out loud, I was like, oh yeah, I got her.
Yeah. And finally, how are you going to remember her? What are those daily reminders that she's still here with you?
It's stuff that I got 3 kids now, but it's stuff that my kids do that remind me of her, and like just silly things that come up that make me think of her. And I don't know, just I constantly think about her, because these things that the kids do remind me of like when I was younger, watching her being a couple years younger than me, and I'm seeing all this. I'm like, okay, it's kind of cool to see them making the same thoughts. And yeah, so
Coming up on 10 years, do you think you'll have some type of way of remembering her?
yeah, I mean, everything I do, I think about her, and I think about stuff that we talked about doing. So I try to do those things. I want to make sure I get those things done. Any of the things that I said we would do.
Like what?
Just stuff like we used to watch Conan every night. We used to watch late night, and so I'd say like one day I'm gonna get on one of those shows. I swear to God. So now I'm gonna find a way to get on one of those shows. I just have to get better at what I'm doing, but that's gonna happen. I just know I have to do it, and that's kind of something I do to feel like connected to her. Is like if I keep those promises and get to all the things that we talked about doing when we were so proud of thinking we were going to do these things. If I start doing those things, I'll feel a little more connected and a little more like she's here.
CJ, thank you so much for making us part of your morning. I appreciate this
Oh,
and
thank you.
getting to know your sister.
Awesome.